remember the day you almost gave in, almost disappeared, nearly left a wound that none of us could heal. I count my stars, it's a miracle you're here. And in spite of it all, you're not afraid to feel. These are the stories I will tell my children. All of the sacrifice and service to them. Nothing comes easy in securing a victory, but it's worth it. These are the stories I will tell my children. Here's to the heroes. May we lift them up and carry our heads high. May we act as a beacon, offer protection, bringing ugly truths to light. May we be better, may we be worthy of our blood and choose to fight. These are the stories I will tell my children. Do you remember the day you promised you would do all you can? Facing an evil you might not live to see its end. Feeling the weight of the world and still here you stand. Staring into the eye of the dark with the will to destroy every power that keeps you away from your right to keep your people alive. These are the stories I will tell my children. All of the sacrifice and service to them. Nothing comes easy in securing a victory, but it will never not be worth it. These are the stories I will tell my children. These are the stories I will tell my children's children. All of the sacrifice and service to them. Nothing comes easy in securing a victory, but it will never not be worth it. These are the stories I will tell my children's children.
And hello, everyone. That was Heroes by Olivia Key, a friend of mine. Beautiful voice she has, and she makes some wonderful, touching music. And I chose that song because it's a wonderfully touching topic I'm going to be chewing the fat with my friend Nathan here in a little bit. Speaking of friends, hello, friends. Welcome. Well met. This is the 75th official episode of Eunuch Corner Club Live. We have a friend that some of you have probably heard of before. He's in a lot of the chats that you guys hang out in. And before we get started, I would like to thank the wonderful people that support me monthly on Subscribestar. We're going to toggle over real quick and show them off. We have these fine folks. If you would like to support me monthly on Subscribestar, I would definitely appreciate that. Even for just $1 a month, you can help me know that what I'm doing matters, and to keep going, to keep doing better, to keep getting stronger in my reach of unifying people together to make a difference. If you would like your name featured here at the first of my streams and at the end of all of my pre-recorded videos, for even $1 a month, you can do so over on Subscribestar. Now, during the stream today, I will be taking chats in the form of entropy messages, Rumble chats, Odyssey hyper chats, and short messages on PayPal, Cash App, and Subscribestar tips. I will be answering any question or comment you have for me or my guest today at the end of the stream, at the end of our discussion. So I will start checking those in about 45 minutes from now to see what you guys have to say. So let's go ahead and toggle back over to my lovely Punim here. Let's see what we have. All right. Goodbye, OBS. I don't need you anymore. So good day. And let's say hello to my friend Nathan. Nathan, welcome on the stream, my friend. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, hello, Years. Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. I've actually had a bit of an up and down day because my soccer team just lost to our biggest rivals in the cup final. So
I noticed you said soccer instead of football. How considerate of you to an American audience.
I'm translating on the fly, but yeah, it's wonderful to be here, and I'm really looking forward to discussing heroes with you. Yes.
So am I. Before we get started, though, we do have a particular discussion to get to, but a lot of my audience won't know you. Some of my audience does participate in AA's chat, which is where I met you first years ago. But I tell you what, before we get started, how about you take 10 minutes or so, tell people why you are the public face and the voice that you are, and what kind of content you do on your channel. And I'll be sharing your link to your YouTube channel in all of the chats. And tell us why Nathan C.J. Hood is the man and the public voice he is today, and what kind of content you have going on your channel.
So I guess just a little bit of background before the channel's creation itself. So I am the descendant of Scottish parents who's been brought up in England. I grew up in a place called Birmingham, which is the second biggest city in the UK. And the school I went to, I was probably one of, or a small minority of English kids that actually went to that school. Most of them were Pakistani or Jamaican immigrants. At the same time, I was probably one of the few Christians in my kind of friendship group. Most were either Muslim, Hindu, or atheist. And then tied in with that, I guess I've always had a leaning towards, broadly speaking, let's just say the political right. At that time, it would have been the Conservative Party, dare I say it. But back then, it was the Conservative Party of the UK. And that was a radical position because everybody else was Labour or Socialist, right? So I'm saying that because I think that gives a context of I've always felt that I'm coming from things from a different perspective to a lot of my peers. And I've seen things from a different perspective. But as time's gone on, going into university, that sense, although going to the University of Edinburgh, studied a degree, did a PhD there, again, although there's, in some senses, there's more familiarity. I have grandparents from Edinburgh, went every summer to the lovely Scottish coast up there. In university in Edinburgh, most students are from America or from England, so not from Scotland.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and a lot from China now, actually, because the Chinese pay a lot of money, more money than Scottish students pay into the system. They're more profitable for the university. So yeah. We could get into that later, but the the thing with it is then again, and universities tending to be quite on the political left.
Uh-huh.
quite anti-Christian, anti-British, anti-white. Um, it gives, again, feeling on the kind of outside of that. So naturally, I went online. I was looking for voices who weren't closing down open thought or closing down perhaps ideas that I had. And I came across a few YouTube channels in this sphere. Actually, before that, I was into kind of Thomas Sowell economics videos because at that point, for me, if it was between Labour and Conservative, at that point, it was like David Cameron, Nick Clegg, Tony Blair-esque kind of peoples. It was all about the economy. So,
As a Southern American, I also sort of started into this sphere like 20
mm,
years ago from sort of the right wing libertarian Mises people. Like that's sort of where I
right.
started into all this too. But please go on.
Well, and I think there's an interesting point there because we were talking a bit beforehand about this idea of, um, government control or
Mhm.
people telling other people what to do, and I guess that's what my objection was to the left at that point, and that's not gone away at all. They still try to tell everybody what to do, and it's even worse. Now you can't just tolerate; you have to celebrate, and we'll close
Yeah.
you down for saying something we disagree with.
Mhm.
But yeah, I was listening to Thomas Sowell videos, and a recommendation came up for Academic Agent on his
Oh.
African economy series.
Oh, that one.
Yeah, a nice, tasty one.
Hmm.
And that after that, I was just hooked, and I started watching. Move on a few years, and probably about 2019, 2020, I started my own YouTube channel because I felt I had something to contribute, which was not necessarily within the conversation. My research is history and theology and philosophy. I
Hmm.
focus on the Reformation in early modern Scotland and how it changed people's attitudes towards emotion and how they felt in relationship to religion. And so I felt there was things there in certain events taking place, in the value systems that people had that weren't really being addressed. So I wanted to kind of put my voice forward and kind of engage with some of the points that were being made. But then move forward again to maybe September this year, which is when I've really started streaming regularly. And what changed was I went to the Shieldings event in the UK. I know you've been to the American one, yes, quite,
It
and
it was
done a
very
lot in it.
empowering to be around so many people that were of similar mind and wanted to take control of the cultural movement. It felt good.
It was really good, and also just to see people who don't hate you for who you are and for your values and for what you want for the country. Just to be in the presence of other people like that for a couple of days was really great. But on the last day, there was an interesting kind of turn in the nature of the talks. Um, Rupert August, who's been on my channel a few times,
Uh-huh.
he gave a talk about restoration, restoring King Arthur, as it were, to the English throne. And that sounds laughable at first, but he went through all of these examples of how in other countries or at other times there'd been a real return to a national myth, something that which everybody knew within that people group or ethnos, and it really became a rallying point for a restoration of the traditional order and morals and hierarchy. And
Hmm.
so he really wanted to pin in on this idea for England and say, well, if you're going to do that with England or maybe Britain more broadly, King Arthur is that symbol or idea which somebody could inhabit and really take forward, and we could rally around that. And then following that, the final talk was Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad.
Hmm.
And he was, again, really addressing the English context and
Yeah.
saying, look, most of us today are deracinated. We are, due to kind of being treated as economic cogs in a machine to
Hmm.
produce and to consume, due to mass migration, due to the breakdown of communities within the UK just because of internal migration and universities, the emphasis upon self-expression. We have no real sense of our Englishness. And actually, if we're going to win back our country, if we're going to see anything like what we want, we need to become a group which has a consciousness of itself.
Yeah.
and of
That's
its,
very similar
yeah.
to the Go Free method, the white well-being community that I'm part
Mm,
of, is we view the decay of any kind of healthy Western identity on the ethnic level directly tied to a mix of these materialist and anti-white, anti-traditional problems that create this ugly feedback loop of Western people are brought up being told, oh, there is no white culture.
mm,
Being British doesn't mean anything. Being American doesn't mean anything. While at the same time you have negative reinforcement. It's
yes.
basically driving entire generations of our people into just being rootless consumers. And I think that is what these big technocratic overlord people want. They don't want anybody to have. They don't want them to put family, God, and community and tradition above their basic needs or lusts or desires, because then they can't be easily controlled and managed in a technocratic way.
No, and they definitely want, and I would say they would want that for the whole world, but they're
Hmm.
starting with us, right? That's
Yeah,
the thing. They're starting with us, but in time, it's going to be every people that
yeah,
are going to lose that. And so,
yeah.
and actually, I did this stream with Radlip and a few others a few months ago on C.S. Lewis's book That Hideous Strength, which is
Hmm.
about a technocratic group trying to take over the world with the reign of rationality and science and so on. And it's pointed out in that book that a true celebration of diversity isn't wanting everybody to be the same. It's wanting the Chinese person to be really embracing Chinese culture and being the most Chinese, embracing
Yeah,
the Tao and Confucianism, right?
yeah.
It's wanting the Englishman to follow Robin Hood and King Arthur and the spirit of Avalon, the Frenchman to follow maybe the Napoleonic verve and so on. Maybe.
Or the noble paladins like Charlemagne and his crew and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that would be a better example. That would be a better example. So yeah, that's what that to me is a beautiful idea, and we're up against that for ourselves, but more broadly for all peoples.
Hmm.
And so
That's the eternal Anglo in us. We don't just want what is great for our people. By perhaps it's both a blessing and a curse, but we believe that we can uplift everyone everywhere.
yeah,
I think it's a beautiful thing about us, but we have to be careful because that
hmm,
sentiment's been weaponized against our ancestors, and well, you see what we have today. We have to be careful.
and also actually you could see what these technocrats are doing as exactly the same. It's the same motive, right? They
Yeah,
think they think that this is could be expanded to all peoples, and some of them I do think genuinely believe that this is a better situation
yeah,
overall. So they're doing this out of what they think is good for humanity. Now it's not, but
yeah.
they think they have that right.
Because if
Um,
humans are nothing but numbers and equations, then they believe they have the technocratic solution to improve humanity, when really it's just breaking everything down and deracinating and erasing everything that means anything.
exactly, and so that conference really motivated me because I thought, well, we don't want it just to stay within this 200 people who have been here in person.
Hmm.
It needs to kind of produce something from that.
Yeah.
And what can I do to do that? Well, my channel then every week on a Tuesday, I look at various topics, but mainly to do with history and philosophy and so on. And I try to bring and mythology, and I try to bring that in a way which will be interesting, but also maybe enriching our lives in some way or another, and
Okay.
giving us more of a sense of where we come from, who we are, what's important in the world. Oh, you've got it up.
Yeah, well, this is a good segue then to let's talk about some of the streams, since you said these are things you want to bring to people. Let's look at your last couple of months of streams. We
Mhm.
have Eros, Heroic and Dangerous. We have Ruskin and Morris, Victorian Counterculture, The Rise or Fall of Anakin Skywalker, Ant Social Structure, Northern Heroic Spirit, Unyielding in Defeat, Story Hour, She by H. Rider Haggard, Story Hour 3.1, She by H. Rider Haggard, Getting IRL and Local, that sounds like something that would be up my alley.
Yeah.
Tolkien Grand Quiz, Story Hour 2, Do the English have a culture? And Merry England, Merry Christmas. Now, as you can see, I have not listened to most of your catalog, but just in these 12 here, give people some examples about what some of these are about, and briefly tell us the kinds of things that maybe a few of these that these topics were.
So maybe the easiest place to start is Story Hour. Every once in a while, I'll try and read a couple of chapters from a story of a book which may have been forgotten, but actually had quite a lot of impact at its time. So She, for example, was written by Rider Haggard, author of King Solomon's Mines. This book was a huge influence on Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, but people don't know that. So it's like, okay, what can we just enjoy a good story, but also there might be more in it that the audience can get. Then maybe if we look at so Eros, heroic and dangerous, Northern heroic spirit, and yielding in defeat. These streams very much look at various aspects of mythology and try to identify maybe patterns or ideas within them, and then how maybe they can inspire us or impact us. So Northern heroic spirit, particularly looking at Norse and Saxon. Eros was broader, looking at the role of romance in empowering the heroic, but also how it can often be a terrible thing for the social order, the moral order, the sacred order.
Yeah.
Think of, there was an image of Anakin and Padme. Anakin is prophesied to destroy the Sith, and because he loves Padme, he goes and helps the Sith and wipes out the Jedi. Now, maybe that was a good thing, but he wasn't meant to do it, right? So,
well, I don't profess to be some type of high scholar of Star Wars, but I believe that as George Lucas presented the prophecy to us in the prequels, he was meant to bring balance to the Force, and that was interpreted as he will destroy the Sith. When in actuality, he just brought a destruction to all of it.
Right. So his romance, his Eros, was catastrophic in that regard.
Yeah.
So that's a little kind of taster of, okay, there's a lot of those ideas in mythology. The getting in real life and local says what it is in the tin, and I try to do these sorts of streams where I think I had Not So Obvious on in that one, and Alex and Birdie.
Oh, that was a fun talk.
Yeah, it was really good fun, and it was practical advice about how people could do that, maybe more in the UK context, because I know there's been a lot of kind of those streams to do with America, but it's, we're quite different countries in some ways and situations. So that was quite helpful. And then Ant's social structure. This was a blast. I've tried to do a few kind of out there streams using nature as a guide to elite theory and political theory and strategy.
That sounds fun.
So my first one was chimpanzee power politics, which was awesome.
I don't remember there being much talk about ant social structure. I listened to this one while I was at the gym and then running errands, so I was kind of fading in and out of paying attention to it. But I remember liking it. I remember being intrigued that you were using something so simple to talk about loftier ideals of how civilization is ran.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, there's a magic in everything if you look for it. And so much of what the modern world does is blinds us to things which are in front of us. And something like the ants, when you get into the detail of their colony life, it's so complex and interesting on its own right. You could people do spend their whole lives studying these things, but then the parallels with human societies and then how that can help us is so fascinating. So for example, the ants work with pheromones essentially. So all of their communication is basically done through smell. So certain predators will simulate the smell, let's say of the queen ant. So the ants then treat this butterfly or caterpillar as if it's the queen ant. It then inhabits the colony, and they will bring it food and they will protect it, and they'll even kill the queen ant because she's a threat to what they think the queen ant is.
Oh no, that's sort of like what's being done to us by the evil people who took control of our civilization.
Right. So you can see that there's an obvious parallel there. but it puts it in a way that is maybe easier to see, or
That's cool.
less involving us. It gives us distance, and maybe mythology does that too. And
Well,
so then
go
you
ahead. Sorry.
can. I was just going to say, then you can use. So I see the value in these things is then you can maybe work out an idea or principle more clearly, and then bring it back round to our situation, and then say, okay, that's what people have done to us, but can we use that at all, or is there a way of safeguarding against that, or so on? Yeah. So that's what my channel really gets up to. Those sorts of crazy variety.
Well, I have sampled a few of your streams. They seem fine. You have I like your voice. I like your demeanor. And one of the things that really got me into YouTube and content was I always enjoy listening to philosophy and religious debates. I was raised heavily Christian, Protestant Christian here in Appalachia. So a mix of Baptist and sort of old world, I guess you just call it Protestantism. And I, of course, like a lot of people that are Gen X, had sort of an atheistic phase where I thought there has to be a better way. We have to unpack all this. There are rational explanations. And since that's what was parroted and echoed to me by academia and TV and music and all of that, it took me until sort of the end of my 20s to realize, wait a minute, no, you can't deconstruct the entire basis of your culture's moral identity while offering nothing to replace it with besides shallow, vapid things like sport ball and pornography and video games and things like that, because then you're just deracinating the literal soul of your people and replacing it with just material enslavement. So I sort of realized that's what was going on and had been since before I was born. And that was a big changing moment for me. And this was right around 2010 when I started really coming to realize, wait a minute, I've been kind of lied to and misled about everything. I'm going to have to sort all this out. And so that was sort of the beginning of my journey to get to where I am now, was around 2009, 2010. But speaking of a journey, the reason I wanted to, or the reason I asked you what you thought would be a good topic is I want to talk to you about something intellectual that's interesting to both of us. And you chose a topic that I like. And that's, of course, the title of the stream, Embracing the Heroic. Now, when it comes to the heroic, when we say the heroic or heroism, how about you explain exactly what that means when people like us talk about it? Take a moment and tell the viewers what we're talking about.
It's a good question. I think the definition I would go with is that offered by Thomas Carlyle in On Heroes and On Hero Worship, which for if folks in the audience don't know, Carlyle's probably one of the key thinkers within the reactionary thought. But what's brilliant about Carlyle is he's not just a kind of political theorist. He thinks in terms of grand scale civilizations, culture, and so on. And he had this idea that all of human society is based around the hero. For him, maybe a great man is somebody who's absolutely sincere in their thought, feeling, and action. And so he would say somebody like Napoleon for him is a great man because although he's promoting democracy, which Carlyle was not a big fan of, he was sincere in driving that forward and essentially making the world conform with that idea, stamping his values upon the world. So he has a big list of people like Muhammad would be another, Cromwell. What sets the hero apart from the great man in his view is that the hero is absolutely sincere in following the transcendent, in upholding those ideals and values which are true throughout time. The laws of nature, he would also call them. But they do it in a way that's contextually relevant or culturally relevant. So Muhammad and Cromwell do not have the same beliefs. There's some crossover. They're both monotheists, and they're both iconoclastic. But in general, they would probably burn each other at the stake.
Yeah.
But for Carlyle, they're both absolutely sincere in upholding the ideals or values that would be appropriate for their time period.
Mhm.
So it would be, and maybe another example he gives is Dante. Dante is a poet who's a hero. Shakespeare would be another. Both
Mhm.
of those are sincere for their time period. But if somebody in the 19th century started articulating things in a way that Dante did, that would be insincere because
I
of
see.
developments in science or the ways that they understand the world and engage with the world. It wouldn't be true for that person. What's interesting then with the heroic for Carlyle is that these people, the force of nature that they are, provoke a response in people around them. So it's not just something which is neutral or allows an apathetic response. They trigger either hatred because they're challenging your power and your order, or admiration, love, even worship to an extent.
Uh-huh.
And if you look at the societies that kind of build up around these people, Martin Luther would be another, and maybe as a clear example, because for Weber, who's Max Weber,
Mhm.
the charismatic leader, their decisions define the laws of a society.
Mhm.
And you could see the hero in that way too. They remake it through their decisions. It's not a bureaucratic system like we have, where it's based on rational principles or abstract principles, I should say.
Yeah.
It's rooted in the person and their decision making. So that to me would be a summation of the heroic, and I think it's a good one. Would
Sure.
you add anything to that, Yes?
I would add that when we talk about embracing the heroic, it's important to remember a big part of the heroic journey of a heroic entity, a hero that's even a fictional one, like well, you use Tolkien because everyone loves Tolkien. If you're talking about an Aragorn, if you're talking about a little or a little Frodo Baggins, a hero is someone who feels put upon to do something that must be done because in your heart you know that it's right and someone must do it. And that falls to you, and you know that it may come with great peril, great detriment to you, but it is right, and so you must do it. And I think that is where we are at in our civilizational step for the regular man right now. We don't have kings and lords and ladies that care for us anymore. We don't have what we had hundreds of years ago. We don't have that. We don't have a president or a parliament elect that serves us or cares about us anymore. So it falls on our shoulders now. We have to be the ones that create whatever it is our offspring and their offspring will have now. So the heroic journey now falls to the shoulders of the common man. If we are to have a future or an ethnic identity at all, it must be what we create and what we can carry forward and propagate with our cultural thrust. And I think that is why heroism and the heroic inspiration or the heroic model in mythology or heroic archetype is something that has to be at the forefront of all of our dissident groups and thinkers right now, because we still have it easy right now in America, in Britain, in France, in Germany. As bad as things have gotten, they can and likely will get much, much worse. And we have to be the voices that will inspire parents right now, young men right now, to be heroic in the face of what looms to get us through this storm, so we can have something positive, so we can have an identity worth cherishing, worth fighting for, worth teaching our children. I think that is what being a hero now is, and that's why we have to talk about it. People like me and you, to inspire others to be heroic, to aspire to that archetype in fiction, in our mythology, in our religions. We have to let it be known that those people, the heroes of now, they will come from the regular men. We don't have heroes popping up at the top end anymore. And don't say
Well,
Elon Musk. Don't say Elon Musk, anybody.
no, I
My
wasn't
hero.
going to say that.
No, I didn't mean you. I meant listeners.
But one thing I wanted to pick up on there then is for Carlyle. Well, I'm going to mix Carlyle and Weber here. They're quite close together, but I think it's helpful. when you have a hero, they establish their own order, and from that, traditions form. So you can see this in the fact that when you look at Saxon royal families, they all tie their lineage to Woden. So they're seeing themselves as descended from the king of the gods, who himself conquered Ymir the giant and formed the whole world. He established his own order, and they are doing the same thing. And kings will constantly do that. They will try and trace their lineage to great mythological and real legendary heroes.
Mm-hmm.
But in time, those become stale. Those forms no longer represent a sincere allegiance to the transcendent, and maybe more the case, there's a corruption, there's injustice that comes from that, and people abuse the power that they've got. They are not the heroes themselves, but they're inhabiting a position which a hero ought to possess. And so the hero has to, it's quite a revolutionary force, actually, because it breaks open the status quo and says, no, we're not going to accept this anymore. This isn't right. And a new order has to form. So you're totally right that we don't have the heroic kings that we ought to have or should have.
Yeah.
But in a sense, for Carlyle, that's the cycle of every civilization is your hero sets it out. Over time, it becomes degenerate.
Yep.
And so a new hero has to arise.
And I think
we're very much living through a time where if that's not going to happen now, it's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's why we're either at the precipice or we've already started the bottom trough of the cycle. And I think that it's going to be very dark for people our age, because you and I are going to grow old in the worst of it. And it's important to not lose heart, to not let the flame in us go out, because once that's out, it's very difficult to rekindle. And I think that speaking about this kind of thing as often as we can to appeal to as many people as we can, we have to keep that fire alive. And I think there are millions of people in America, and at least hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, in the UK that still believe in the things that you and I cherish, that believe we should have a culture and a structure and an order based on our values, our people, our cultural history, etc. But the problem is we have no elites that act as the mirror to reflect our desire and our ethnicity onto society from the top down. That's not there anymore. And when that's not there, there has to be a hero to rise up to change that, to fix that, to lead the way towards something better. And so I hope, it is what I pray for, that we are going to start having men and women, of course, too. But when we talk about the heroic model, of course, we believe in the archetype. So it's male. So I want to believe that there are going to be good men that lead us by example and by heroic sacrifice to get us through this storm and lead us to a brighter dawn one day. And it's a critical thing to lean heavily into that heroic narrative, because that's where we're all at right now. We have to be that, or we're going to have great loss, I think, and maybe even total erasure if we don't have heroic action and a heroic message.
I think so. One thing I've been kind of mulling over the last few weeks is the role that comfort and ease has in stopping the heroic. And I'll give you a couple of examples of how this isn't the case in the heroic journey. So take somebody like Robin Hood. He, I mean, there's many legends and myths, but if you kind of take the most present form of it, he only really becomes Robin Hood when his earldom is taken away from him and he's made an outlaw by Prince John. Well, let's take Luke Skywalker. He doesn't go off on the journey until his house is burnt down and his aunt and uncle are burnt. And then he goes off. There's this constant theme within these myths of there has to be some inciting incident. There has to be a moment where the comfort and ease is taken away for that journey to start, for that opportunity to be there. And if you look at the early 20th century science fiction, what were they all scared about? People looked at Orwell and say, oh, it's this totalitarian regime. But if you look at H.G. Wells and The Time Machine, or if you look at Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, it's a society where we're all seeped in comfort.
Yeah.
And we're
afraid of discomfort. We're afraid of being inconvenienced.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
and it's quite striking in the Time Machine. Have you read it at all, Years?
No, but I am familiar with the old original movie
Oh, okay,
that
okay.
had the good stop motion effects and the time
Oh,
advanced
yeah.
effects. I am unfortunately I don't read well. I have ADHD. I don't take medicine for, so it makes it very difficult to read fiction. But
Yes.
I used to muscle through it, but I haven't for a long time. So I am not very well read like a lot of the people in our sphere. But I am very well listened and well watched. I do listen to a lot of audiobooks on
Mm.
Reactio and Skeptical Waves output. And I have watched a lot of movies, important literary movies like War of the Worlds. And I used to watch a
Mm.
lot of AMC, that's American Movie Classics,
Oh,
back when
yeah.
I was a child. So I saw a lot of the big important movies from like the 30s to the 50s.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's awesome. Well, you know
But
the
I am
basic
vaguely
premise.
familiar with the story of the Time Machine, and I've seen the old
Yeah.
classic movie 3 or 4 times, so I know the basics.
Well, the bit I want to focus on is our hero. He goes to the future, well into the far future. I think it's like 800,000 AD or something like that.
Hmm.
And he arrives, and it's this kind of, on the surface, it's an idyllic world. It's there's food is free, and all the people are happy and joyful, peaceful, but they're all like children. Physically,
Hmm.
they're like children, and mentally, and so they react to things in a very simplistic way. And he speculates that the drive in human beings, to a certain extent, is to overcome physical necessity, is to
Hmm.
remove hardship from life. And to a degree, that makes sense. And so we constantly strive to make our own lives better, our society better. And let's just say at some point, this human race manages to do that. We reach a utopia where machines can do all of our labor,
Human
and
species, not human race. Human species.
human species. I stand corrected. And the and all their needs are met. There's
Hmm.
nothing to fear. Well, then you would regress, because having physical strength or mental strength, both things required for the heroic, you would be restless in such a society. It's not adapted to
Hmm.
being part of this perfect system, interesting system, right? And
Hmm.
so to be comfortable, you have to regress into very basic instincts. And so I've been wondering, well, part of the problem that we have today, I think, for many people, certainly my generation, is we're very comfortable in the meat. We can get by most of the time without our physical needs being in jeopardy.
Hmm.
Um, Even if there's things we don't like, they're not existential issues
Right.
at the moment, anyway.
It's not. I have to worry about coyotes eating my children. It's not that kind of thing.
Yeah, or the regime coming around and just like shooting you tomorrow.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
We're not there
and
yet.
not yet. No, no. And I know for some people it is the case, but it's not for most people.
Yeah.
Certainly of a certain class. And so I think that has been a huge factor in stifling the heroic will. Because if you're comfortable, you don't have an inner drive to feel that you need to be heroic or have those emotions. And actually, so this deterioration is itself going to be provides the scenario where it's more likely to happen.
Yeah.
That's why they're constantly trying to go back to what does AA call it? Fresh Prince.
He calls it going back to Fresh Prince, which means going
Yes.
back to the 90s copium den where
Right.
everyone just believes, oh, progress forever, everything's going to be fine, everything's going to be great.
Hmm.
When really that was the height of evil people taking over and then shifting the narrative to make it against us. Because you remember, well, I remember
Mm.
I grew up in the 80s. I'm a late Gen Xer. I'm Carl Benjamin's age. And so I grew up mostly in the 80s. And during that time, it was a different kind of children's message with the white erasure and all that. It was,
Mm.
well, white people made a great civilization, Americans and Anglos, and oh, it's after World War II and everybody's going to get along. So, all you white people here in the West, don't see race, don't care about religion, just treat everybody the same. And then fast forward 20 years, and the same message by the same companies to the same people is, you are an evil Nazi if you care about white people and think British
Yes.
people have value. And it's like, and at the same time, you have to let the entirety of the world move into where you live and take your children's future from you, or you're a bad person. The shift
Mm.
is that stark in just 20 years, half my life. So things have we have been taken advantage of. We have been lied to, and our good nature has been weaponized against us.
But
I've
I
seen it
think part
happen.
of that, I think part of that is because people who could have resisted felt happy and healthy and
Mhm.
comfortable.
And
And
they
so
wanted
if
to
you,
believe it. Like I
yeah,
wanted to believe it when I was young. I was like, "Oh,
mhm,
yay, no more war. People are going to get along." Boy, was I wrong. That was a
no.
lie.
Yes, yes. What did they call it? Uh, the end of history,
Yeah.
and no more war. We'll all just have peace and sing kumbaya. It'll be great.
Yeah. And well, we all seen where we've gotten from the early aughts to now. The second 20 years of my life has changed even more than the first 20. So I'm worried about the third 20 years of my life. We're just starting into it. But
But
I do my best to
I
not give
think
up
there's
and to continue being heroic because we all need to. We all need to
well,
be.
I think there's grounds of hope because of this, because things are getting worse. We're more likely to be pushed into that mode anyway.
Mhm.
When we're comfortable, we're less likely to resist. When we're and that's on different levels. I think people in our sphere are already feeling some of that fire from the
Mhm.
regime.
Yeah.
Certainly, it's harder to express yourself. People's bank accounts are getting closed,
Yep.
so on and so forth. As it goes on, in Europe, there's been energy crisis that I think has been really bad on the continent.
Yeah.
Uh, Inflation is really high at the moment in a lot of
Mhm.
countries, and yet we're supposed to believe we're moving forward in progress. It doesn't ring true, and people are
No.
getting angry about it.
Mhm.
So I think there is ground for optimism in a weird way. The worsening forces it out, and
Mhm.
uh, a really good example of this in mythology. Tolkien talked about northern heroic spirit or courage, and it's quite an Anglo thing for him,
Mhm.
or Scandinavian. He'll look at something like Ragnarok, and he points out that with Ragnarok, Odin knows he's going to be defeated. It's inevitable. It's written in fate.
Mhm.
But that doesn't stop him from fighting. There's something within him that says, "No, I'm not just going to lie down. I'm going to go out in a glorious fight." And so he gathers together the mightiest warriors of the human race, human species,
Thank you.
and to Valhalla,
Uh-huh.
and the gods fight against the monsters, and they all die, but they go out great. You see that spirit in something like the Battle of Maldon, where the Saxons, they are surrounded, their king or their lord is dead, but what the famous lines about the spirit will go stronger even as the limbs grow weaker.
Yeah.
And you see this again and again. The Battle of Rorke's Drift would be an example. The
I don't
Alamo.
know that one. What's that one?
Oh, so this was it's actually in the film Zulu. It's portrayed, but it's a real battle
I saw that
in
film. That's that the old one from 62?
yeah, with Michael Caine in it.
Yeah, it's an old film, but I've seen it. I saw it when I was younger.
Oh, it's a cracker. Essentially, it was when the British Empire were in South Africa, and one of their main armies was destroyed by a Zulu force, and nearby there was an outpost of about 150 British soldiers, and 4,000 Zulus came against this outpost, and the 150 soldiers stood their ground. They didn't run. They were unyielding. They thought they were all going to die, but there's no refutation in defeat if you stand strong, and they
Right.
managed to fight off this army
Wow.
and gain their respect. And it's kind of gone down in legend as this
And I guess
amazing.
that's why there was a movie about it.
Right. And you see the same thing, I think, that same spirit with the Alamo
Uh-huh.
as well. So this kind of, but Tolkien says it's that situation which brings it out of you. It's the fact that defeat looks inevitable, that suddenly your courage rises to meet it. Some
Yep.
people will run, some cowards will run, but there's something within the Anglo which says, "No, I stand my ground. I'm going to fight,
Yep.
even if I lose. I'm fighting for something, whether it's my
Hmm.
kin, my home,
And
my God, and actually that can empower you to overcome the greater force,
it
like at
does.
Rock's
And
Drift.
most of my family lineage is from Scotland and Northern England.
Oh,
Um,
right, that's
uh-huh.
where I live. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I know. And that sentiment is still very alive here in rural
Mm.
Appalachia. It's common talk at church. It's common talk here. Like when I go to the local comic book store to say hello to my friend who runs a gaming store, or whether I go talk to my, well, I'm not going to say her name, but when I go talk to one of my other friends who works at a credit union, it is very common talk here for us to say, well, yeah, things have certainly gotten worse, and it looks like that America's going tits up and the world's against us. But you know, we just sort of shrug and be like, well, we're gonna keep loving God. We're gonna keep going to church. We're gonna keep raising our kids the best we can. We're gonna do everything we can to continue our way of life here, come hell or high water. And well, if God believes it's our time to be done away with, then we're going to hold our heads up high and do the best we can. And I know that that's kind of a sad, normie, defeatist take, but this is what we're talking about: is
Hmm.
people that haven't given up yet, people that have a genuine sensation of family and heritage and cultural history. They will be that way. but but I think this is why our identity itself is under attack, because these technocratic manager types that
Mm.
just want everybody to be part of their global equations of usury, they don't want us to have that, because they know we'll be indignant, righteously so, against what they want to do to us. And so that's why, as normal and as trite as that sentiment I just shared is, it's critically important that we cultivate that spirit, and that we don't give up, and that we will stand there and say, no, no to this, no to Drag Queen Story Hour, no to mass migration, no to our businesses being replaced and shut down by these cronies that just want to steal our money. And the more people that we can influence to not give up and to just say no, the better of a chance we have for recapturing the destiny that is rightfully ours within our own people, within our own lands. And so it's a very important thing to realize that is a sentiment that is strong in us naturally, but it's also one we need to cultivate, because we have, like, I guess I'm sort of being cyclical here. So let me put a stop to that. The reason why I bring this up again is you just said that the the frustrations and the loss of comfort is what more likely inspires that. So it's right for us to want that, but we shouldn't just want total destruction and decay and our people to suffer. What we should
Yeah.
hope for is that as the evil people continue to do evil to us, we should hope that the moral, righteous minded, and spirited people among us will be amplified by that pressure and by that suffering and loss of comfort, to inspire sort of a resonantial effect that will uplift us all together to rise to meet the occasion. And that is
Mhm.
being heroic. That is what embracing the heroic movement should be. That's why it should drive us, I think.
I think that's right, and um, I think so. So Tolkien would say the kind of last stand idea that we've been talking about, that will draw it out of everybody or most Anglos.
Hmm.
But for he says the fattest, even the fattest, silliest hobbit will have that experience when they
The
when they
fattest, silliest hobbit. That's cute.
when they've been pushed into the real shadows, then they've lost everything else. That sincerity shines through. But you're right that often that isn't the case for most people. Most people aren't put in that exact situation. And when you look at the myths, we mentioned Robin Hood. He
Hmm.
was already of noble character before he was forced to become this vigilante
Hmm.
fighting for justice. But the situation brought that out. It was a catalyst, as it were. So you could see a difference there. And I think it's actually reflected in a difference between um, modern heroes. Well, that's not quite right. I'd say 19th century, maybe earlier 20th century heroes and ancient heroes, broadly. Um, there'll be exceptions because when you come to the classical world, I think Evola talks a bit about this, and to some degree Spengler as well. Your ancient hero is probably descended from the gods, and he doesn't have to go on a journey usually. So somebody like Hercules is the son of Zeus.
Mhm.
He is pretty much perfect. And so what sets him on his quest is, depending on what story you read, he is possessed by madness by one of the Greek gods, and he slays his family in a fit of rage. But he's not aware of what he's doing, and
Mhm.
so he wants to be penitent for what he's done, and so he's forced to do these quests to achieve penitence. So it's an external thing being pushed upon him to do. But once that's done, he's free of his guilt. But there's a sense in which his character doesn't change through that. He is still this great man who has to do these quests
Mhm.
because of an external force, fate, circumstance, the gods. Whereas your 19th and 20th century hero tends to be somebody who doesn't start out heroic, who isn't necessarily a great character at the beginning, but the events take a turn where they are forced on a journey which will bring out of them or force them to become heroic,
Like Frodo and Samwise.
like Frodo and Samwise. Yes, and so that's quite an interesting difference. You could connect it with Evola's idea of solar and lunar,
Mhm.
which I know that's been done a fair bit by other people.
Philosophicat and AA had a stream about that
Yeah,
recently. Did you listen?
yeah, it was really
It was
good.
it was
Really
pretty good. It
interesting.
was a pretty good chat. I liked it.
So we could connect it quite clearly. So for um, Evola in kind of very ancient times, people had more of, or the great people had a sense of their own divinity being within them. So they weren't
Mhm.
looking to something else for the divine. So they were like a sun emanating their own glory. So Hercules he is descended from the gods. So he's
Mhm.
a heroic divine hero. Whereas in later ages, the divine is no longer located within the self, but somewhere that humanity must reach towards. It's kind of Faustian actually as well, in
Mhm.
terms of we are trying to map out and conquer the infinite, trying to
Mhm.
reach it. And the Holy Grail quest is a good example of this.
Yeah.
Galahad, the greatest knight of all, one of Arthur's knights, goes out on this quest in search of the Holy Grail, which is the font of Christ's blood and thus of the gateway to divinity.
Mhm.
So it's a lunar relationship insofar as you are not divine yourself, but you allow the divine light to reflect upon you, as it
Mhm.
were. And so maybe the hero's journey is a bit ties in with that idea of the lunar, that you must seek the greater or the higher rather than it being there at the very beginning. And so maybe so to bring this back round to what you were saying, I realize that was a long tangent.
No, it's okay. That's where these kind of talks go. Please go on though. Please.
Well, the if we take that idea, maybe some people are born great and have that kind of solar energy from the beginning. And I think Carlyle's heroes tend to be those sorts of characters. Oliver Cromwell seems like the sort of man who was always like that and imposed his will upon the world. Whereas maybe most of us are not like that, but we can go on a hero's journey like Frodo and Sam and become heroic
Mhm.
in various ways. I think that's a very helpful model of seeing these two types. And of course, there's a hierarchy of heroes as well. So you're
Mhm.
going to have your truly great ones. The Lord of the Rings is a good example of this. You have Aragorn, who's going to become king of Gondor. He's leading the military efforts against Sauron. And then you have the humble Frodo and Sam, who are doing something maybe even more important in terms of destroying the ring.
But they are
But
different kinds of heroes. They do
they're
feel
different.
different. Yeah, it's a different feel between the heroes. Yeah.
And Gandalf as well. He's more of a guide who's at the side. He's not. He is marshalling
More of the
troops.
role of the bodhisattva or the wise man that points the way than the
Yeah,
actual hero itself in the story. Yeah.
but you need those sorts of heroic characters too. So there's actually a whole. If you're wanting to kind of embrace the heroic, you
Mhm.
can do that in a number of different ways to help uh, achieve victory. And so I would encourage people to think in those terms as well. Of, okay, I might not be an Aragorn, but could I be could I be a Sam, or could I be a Gandalf kind of figure for the next generation, or something like that?
And you can also be a hero within the natural order, within a traditional order, if you are a weak male. Like, for example,
Yeah.
I'm an intersex person. I claimed the title eunuch because I don't want to be associated by sex and gender within the way modernity says I could be. What options would I have? Something under the transgender umbrella? Would I have some kind of medical condition as an identity? No. I look to history and tradition, and all across the world, across multiple races and civilizations, there have been a eunuch caste that advised and assisted great men, that assisted heroes and rulers at different times. And I said, look, there is a traditional socket for a lesser feminine male like myself, and I don't have to buy into all this modern transgender garbage to find my place in the great order of things. And so that's why I took on the name Yiz the Eunuch for my channel. Is I don't want to lie about what I am. I don't want to lie and pretend to be a woman like the transgender lunatics, but I also don't want to lie and pretend that I'm something else that I'm not. So I wanted to be something genuine that would still fit into a more natural, realistic expression of how I view Western civilization and humanity. And I think that people who are lesser or weaker, people listening right now, you're probably not a type A go get 'em superhero that's going to start a Fortune 500 business tomorrow. That's not you. That's not me. Most of us are normal. And so you can be heroic being a mother or a father. You can be heroic in raising 5 or 6 children and instilling within them the same heroic values. The Christian or non-Christian expressions of the religion of our people, why we believe what we do, what they should seek and strive for. You can be heroic being a regular mother and father. You can be heroic being a youth group leader. You can be heroic being a good teacher at a private school or a homeschool. We can do heroic things in our lives that have tremendous value and impact that doesn't mean there's going to be statues built of you one day or you're going to be remembered in the next encyclopedia. Like, you can be heroic and have a heroic arc being a regular mother and father, being a regular husband and wife. And that's who I hope my words inspire. Is I want all of the people listening to be a hero in your life, to be a wonderful father, a wonderful wife, mother, best friend, boss, team member. You can be heroic and carry that light forward, and don't let the cancerous plague of modernity let that light go out. Because the harder things get, the more discomforts people are faced with, they're going to start looking to heroes like you. They're going to look for the best woman or man that they know and emulate what we're doing. And the more people start emulating what we're doing, the faster that we take back control of our lands and our communities. So that's sort of my take on why pushing for the heroic and inspiring heroism is more important now than ever for us.
Oh, definitely. And there was two things I wanted to build on what you said.
Sure.
One of them was I was thinking about. So at the Tower of Cirith Samwise Gamgee is tempted by the Ring of Power, and he's able to resist it. It kind of gives him this vision of him being a warrior striding across Mordor with a flaming sword and defeating Sauron, and then growing a beautiful garden within this desolate wasteland, which I think is a really beautiful temptation. How sweet is Sam that the ring tempts him in that way, but he's able to resist on two accounts.
That says a lot about his character, that's how the ring has to tempt him.
Yeah, you can build a nice garden.
Yeah.
But he's able to resist in two ways. One is that his love for his master, Frodo, prevents him, because it would mean abandoning his master, essentially. And then secondly, is that he has a sense that it's too much of a burden for him, that he's not big enough to be able to bear the weight of that role, essentially, and that all that he needs is his little garden and cottage at home. That's all he needs. That's his kingdom, essentially. And so I think that's quite interesting on kind of counterbalancing what we've been saying in terms of, yeah, being heroic can take many forms. And actually, for Sam, it wasn't striding across Mordor. That might be our first thought of what the truly heroic is. But in embracing his role within the Order, within the metaphysical order, the great chain of being,
Uh-huh.
he's actually able to resist great evil and help the quest be completed. If he takes on that role which is above him, it fails.
Yeah.
And so I think that's quite an interesting thing in terms of, okay, actually being heroic is also being aware of your own limitations and what purpose you may have as a consequence to your strengths and limitations and your responsibilities as well. So his is to his master.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I was going to say is, so it's very interesting that you use the term eunuch and identify yourself with a category from history, because one of the things I've been thinking about is we all have a frame of how we understand spatial, temporal, and our relations to things within that matrix. And mythology can influence that. It can seep into that. So, for example, in England, wherever you go, there's probably some legend connected to some place. So the River Humber, for example, is so named because the Saxon king Humber was thrown in there and killed by some people. But and then where I live, Northumberland, or north of Humber's Land. So again, we're getting connected to the story. Britain itself is the so named after or associated with the story of King Brutus, who was a descendant of the Trojans who fled after the fall of Troy. So automatically then when you say Britain, it's not just a name of a land, as it were.
It has mythology built into it.
It's tied into the landscape. Or let's think temporally. This might be an easier example. We have Christmas holidays, right? We have Easter holidays. And people do celebrations at these times. They don't just work all of it. They have certain activities they will do. In medieval Europe, that would have been very prescribed in certain ways. There was a whole 12. So the 12 days of Christmas was just partying nonstop, and you had the Lord of Misrule, usually a servant who was elevated to be king over everybody else for the 12 days or so, and they would get to organize all the hijinks and fun.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Oh, it was great fun. I mean, in the Roman times, they then got sacrificed to the gods at the end. So maybe you go out
less
with a blast.
fun.
You go out with a blast, right? You have a great party, and then you're so drunk you don't remember being burned alive. But that
would have to be some good drugs, I think.
Very good, very good. But the point is that these festivals, there's a time is not just a sequence of days or when you work and when you don't work. There's an actual liturgy tied to it, and then relations too. So I mentioned Brutus, so the British people, and then with Hengist and Horsa, the Saxons in England, there's a certain or let's say like Abraham and the Jews, there's a mythological origin being tied in here.
Yeah.
With the historical. So all of these things then give a resonance and a givenness. So I'm not just a product of a vacuum. I actually have been born into a culture with a set of traditions which can be mapped onto space, time, and the people. And these actually characterize patterns, deep patterns within our being. And so I think it's really important what you're doing with like the eunuch idea, for example, but with all of our kind of relationships, and not using the current understanding of the world, but embracing a different frame and bringing that to be. And that might be different for different people in the chat, what myths they want to use, or legends, or so on.
Yeah, because some of my listeners aren't even native English speakers, and some of my listeners are also true. They choose to embrace non-Christian origins of religious and spiritual expression, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I encourage those people, as long as they are doing everything that they can to build healthy ethnos and raise children to not be poisoned by modernity. That's wonderful. That's fine. And I think that, and of course, I have a lot of Christian followers who put being Christian first before everything else. And that doesn't mean that these people, one of them's wrong. They can all be wrong if they if they fall victim to the worm and the entropy, and they raise their children to hate men and be anti-white and only care about sport ball and pornography and stuff, that's a failure. But you can also be successful being a Christian or Asatru or whatever else it is if you consciously act in a heroic way to be the best that your socket is. If you are a bell curve person of normal intelligence, normal looks, normal genetics, that doesn't mean that you can't be a heroic mother or best friend. You can do heroic things. And a big part of, like we talked about a minute ago, is recognizing your place in the order. If you know that you're just an orbiter of a person and you don't have it in you to be a great leader or whatever, that's fine. You can be a great supporter. You can be a great friend. You can be a great bridesmaid or good sister or good uncle that helps raise your family's children, even though you don't have children. We all have to find a way to be valuable and meaningful to the people in our ethnos, our community, our church. We all have to start doing that instead of just being distracted by entertainment and culture and social media and all these things that pull us away from what we should heroically care about, which is our people, our family, our community, our children, our mythology, keeping all of that alive and connected in time and space. And I think that's a beautiful place for us to sort of wrap things up here of why it's important to have that heroic energy, no matter what strata of person you might be, whether you're the lowest of peasants or the most noble of lords. We all must act in accordance to the order and be heroic in that I guess socket of where we are at in the great wheel of being.
Oh, definitely. I think that's beautifully said. And to that end, then I would encourage people. For example, you've got many supporters already. People like Yiz, go and support them because they're doing that in their own way, and you can help that. You can do your part to help people like Yiz do that. I think that's and there are many others within this sphere that are also worthy of that sort of attention. I'd also encourage as well, so there's thinking heroically in terms of maybe our families and our local communities, but then within our sphere or our movement, there's also thinking about, okay, what role can I play? Given my skills and my strength, how can I contribute to making this go somewhere? So maybe that is just giving $5 a month to Yiz because
that's sweet of you. Thank you for the endorsement.
No, but just in terms of, you think Yiz has got something good to say and you want that to get out there more, and so that helps. Or maybe it's going to an in real life event and listening to the speakers and getting some inspiration there. It might even be creating your own YouTube channel because you've got something unique to say that would really help. There's all these different ways that people can contribute, and there's many more behind the scenes, like running, like being a moderator in a chat, or setting up discords
or helping organize basket weaving to get people connected in real life. Like that's very important. There's a lot of people I've met that are very critical to helping build this network of thinkers that care about tradition and values and religion and race and ethnicity and cultural things. I've met a lot of people that no one will know the name of that are still very important for getting people connected, putting together whatever it is, whether it's a picnic or a speaking event. There are a lot of people that are valuable that you'll never know the name and see the face of. And I want to inspire those people listening too. Like, it's going to take all hands to get this boulder over the hill. And we all have to contribute and do what we can. But we must associate all that we do with a greater order, a higher connection of family and community, or we are going to die deracinated and broken apart. We have to get back to where we share something big with our countrymen and people in even other countries that we are willing to face and to fight for, or we're going to be replaced and conquered by people who have that. So that's why I think that the heroism dovetails into all the stuff that we all talk against, like, the ugliness of modernity, the anti-white stuff, the anti-male stuff, all that stuff. Being against that stuff is good, but you also have to do more than that, because just being against that stuff does not positive culture create. We have
Yeah.
to be in the business of creating real culture we can share with others and build identity around. So that will be my closing statement on the topic. Let's let you have a closing statement on the topic of why heroism is important in the current day and age, and then we'll move to the last segment of the stream.
So, well, heroism is important because it's the way that we're going to fix things, and it's also better because it's aligning with what's true at the end of the day. And I think if I was to encourage people to how can you kind of go about this? How could you maybe embrace the heroic? I would encourage you maybe to pick a set of myths or legends and really get to grips with them. Maybe it's reading, maybe it's watching, maybe it's listening to music that's connected to it. Really steep yourself within that frame. Maybe then attend rituals or so on, or performances of that, because it's within these contexts that you actually we don't just watch them as kind of apathetic things. We feel something in response, and what we're feeling is both in response to the events which are taking place, but also what they symbolize at a deeper level. Those patterns, those archetypes, which are still true today. And so then it's almost, and especially in a ritual, that's even more powerful. And so then you're becoming the sort of person who feels or has an effective understanding of these deeper truths, which in turn is going to bring that heroic character to being within yourself. That's the best way, I think, in our modern context, we can make a start on it. So I'd encourage everybody to do that.
That's beautifully said, Nathan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Normally, we have at least a little bit of community engagement, but right now, all of the avenues through which people can send messages are completely blank. We don't have anything right now. I'm going to refresh and make sure I'm not missing anything. I'm going to refresh Cash App and PayPal and all the usuals, and make sure we're not missing anything. But no, I think today it's people don't seem to have much to say, so that's fine. Give me just a second. PayPal's doing that weird thing where it makes me do a CAPTCHA even though I was just logged in a second ago. It's very, very odd. It's making me do a third one. How interesting. Okay. I don't know what's wrong. I was just logged in a minute ago.
You're just too radical for it.
PayPal has refreshed, and no, we don't have anything over there. So thank you for being here with me today, Nathan. Thank you guys for listening, and thank everyone who likes and shares like usual. A big thank you to the people who financially support me every month. Thank you so much. I am continuing to do better. I'm having professional stream elements built for my Monday night Discordant Dragons. I'm doing my best to reach out to new and interesting people like my friend Nathan here to bring you guys more good mind and soul food to get you through life and to inspire you to do great things. And Nathan, now is the time of the stream where I always ask my guests, after all we've talked about and gone over today, is there any one question you'd like to ask me that we could talk about before we get out of here today?
Yeah, I've been watching some of your walk streams where you go out for walks in the countryside, and I've been really enjoying them. And given it kind of connected to what we were talking about earlier, I was wondering if there's any particular like folk stories or legends connected to the landscape around where you live.
Well, I mean, you've got the iconic ones, your Daniel Boones and your Davy Crockett's and that kind of thing. But no, if there is a heroic narrative or heroic archetype that really inspires me the most, it is a warrior who is a noble warrior and knows that he is fated to die, but goes to combat anyway, or stands against seemingly unstoppable odds. But he knows it's the right thing, and his place is to draw steel in front of it and say, no, I don't care if there's 100 million of you and you will kill me. You will have to kill me to get to your objective, because this is my place to fight and die here. And that's why I feel so strongly led to be a voice of reason and love for white people in general, for Western civilization in general, for males in general, because our the current war that we're in is an almost unstoppable army of spiteful mutants and satanic billionaires and pedophiles and soulless dregs and NPCs and all the things you can say that are up against us to exterminate us, to blow our flame out. And that flame is not going out on my watch. I don't care how dire it looks. I don't care what the odds are. My place is to stand here, sword in hand, and say, over my dead body, literally, I'm going to fight till the end. Because the one thing that I'm afraid of, and the thing that keeps me going, is being old, 70, 80, 90 years old, and looking outside, and whether it's an anti-white pogrom or technocratic communists or whoever it is that's coming to exterminate me for wrongthink and take my property, I don't want my last thought to be, what if I would have just? What if I would have just made more videos? What if I would have just gone to more meetings? What if I would have just handed out another stack of flyers? What if I would have just not given up back when I did 20 or 30 years ago? Maybe things wouldn't have gotten to this bad. So I'm going to stand the tide, sword in hand, until they either kill me or we come out of this storm together. And that's my answer to that.
May this be the hour that we draw swords together. Yes.
Amen, brother. Amen. Well, that was a good stream. I had a lot of fun talking to you. We'll definitely stream together another time. All of you listening, thank you so much. I encourage you to, if you like this content, please consider supporting me for even $1 a month. That's an option over on Subscribestar. But definitely help me grow. The thing you can do most to help me is, since I'm suppressed by YouTube and the other sites aren't very good at propagating material, share my streams. Invite people personally to listen to my content. Same with Nathan. Any other content creator that you like, the best thing you can do to help us grow is to share our links out and invite your friends and family to listen to our content. That helps us tremendously, because the algorithms and social media don't really help us very much because we got the deck stacked against us. So thank you guys so much. I will be back tomorrow night, like always, with Discordant Dragons. I have a bunch of fun guests lined up. I already have my whole team together. And this Wednesday, on the next segment of Corner Club, I have Jason Kuna, the No White Guilt guy himself, coming on at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, Wednesday morning, 4 p.m. GMT, to talk about the Go Free method, why it is and what it is, and his impetus for creating it all those years ago, and just to talk about his journey of being like me and trying to be a voice of reason about white racial issues in a sea of bad ideas and hostile actors. So it'll be a very good stream. I definitely encourage all of you guys to come in for that. And Nathan, now that we're at the end, I'm going to share your link again. Shill yourself. Tell people why they should come join your channel and what they can expect in the upcoming weeks from you.
Well, first, thank you, Yiz, for having me on. It's been absolutely wonderful, and I look forward to next time already.
Me too.
On Tuesday, so I have a YouTube channel, generally streaming on Tuesdays, 7 p.m. GMT. This Tuesday, we do every month an English restoration stream. So we look specifically at English mythology and history, Rupert August, Daughter of Albion, and maybe a guest or two.
Oh, that'll be fun. I love Daughter of Albion. She's got a lovely voice.
Oh, she does. She does. Melts everybody's hearts. And
It sure does.
And this time, what are we doing? We're looking at the history of chocolate in the United Kingdom.
Ooh.
Because most of the chocolate companies, the biggest ones, went big during the Industrial Revolution in the United Kingdom. But there was also an interesting how would you put it? There was a strong emphasis on making life worth living, essentially, for the worker, because industrial Britain was not a great place to live. But the chocolate industry was actually trying to counter the worst parts of modernity. So we're going to be looking at that. Cadbury's, fries, Roundtrees. It's going to be great. We're going to try some chocolate. It'll be good fun.
If I can be there live, I'll try to catch that one. That sounds lovely. Well, that was a wonderful discussion about why we mustn't let the fire in us go out, and why being heroic, at no matter who you are, even if you're a small ant or the queen herself, you must be heroic for the good of your people and for our future. With that said, we'll wrap things up. Thank you again, Nathan. And I will see you guys tomorrow night for more Discordant Dragons. God bless.
God bless everyone.